Hi everyone. You are listening to For Those We Lost. I'm your host, Jennifer Sullivan. Thank you for being here. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can go to the website forthosewelostpodcast.com and click on the contact button and reach me that way as well. This show won't ever have a members area or episodes that you have to pay to listen to, but there are expenses to hosting a podcast. And if you'd like to help, you can support this show at buymeacoffee.com/forthosewelost. In this show, people share their stories of losing a loved one to COVID. As the pandemic continues, many of us feel the weight of the world wanting to move on and the pain of our loss that holds us tight. For us, there is no avoiding the ever-present reminder that we lost a loved one to COVID. It is with us every day, everywhere. What you hear in each story is grief, sadness, and love. We will more than likely talk about the vaccine and maybe a little bit about politics, and you may not agree. But I hope you'll keep listening. I hope you'll stay to the end of each episode and realize that each person who openly shares here has experienced deep grief over the loss of a loved one. And that's something we will all experience. We all love someone, we will all lose someone we love, and we will all grieve. These are the stories of those we lost to COVID. Thanks for being here with me. I've got a wonderful show coming up for you. Today, I'll be talking to Kim in Georgia. Kim lost her husband, Mike Lancaster, on June 10th, 2021, after a 7-week battle with COVID. Mike was on a ventilator for a week and was able to come off that, and when he did, he asked Kim if he died and went to heaven. He told her about visiting heaven and seeing her grandparents and his grandparents and their grandkids, one of whom hadn't even been conceived yet. As his health worsened, he had to be re-intubated and moved to a bigger hospital. The story Kim tells of Mike's life and his visit to heaven and his own knowing that he was going to die is extremely emotional, and I hope it can provide everyone listening with some hope and peace. For context, we recorded this episode on January 23rd, 2022. Kim mentions the In America Flags installation in Washington, D.C., and Rami's Heart COVID-19 Memorial. She also mentions the grant for healthcare workers who died of COVID and the FEMA grant for COVID-19 funeral assistance. All these links are in the show notes below. And with that, I'd like to welcome Kim to the show. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
You live in Georgia.
I do.
And you lost your husband on June 10th of 2021.
Yes, ma'am, I did.
I usually start in March of 2020, but with you and your husband, I know you both work in healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd really like to go to the spring of 2021 and what you were doing and how COVID had changed your lives and where you were at with work and just how things were going with your family, and then how COVID came into your lives.
Okay. Mike had actually retired in October of 2020. And so he stayed at the farm a lot and he liked to hunt. So his life pretty much consisted of being away from people anyway. But every now and then he would go in and work at the neurosurgery clinic that he was a nurse practitioner that he worked at. He still wanted to work a day or so a month. He couldn't completely give it up. And we had some worries there with him being out again around patients. But, we were towards the end of what we thought was the worst of the pandemic. He had been vaccinated, he wore his mask. We really thought that, hey, we got this, we've gotten to the end and we're okay. But he worked with a physician who did not believe in masking or vaccinations, which is that's I'm not here to push that one way or the other, but I'm just telling you my story. And several people in the office got sick about the same time Mike did, along with this physician. And it's just he tried so hard to stay away from people, as much as he could, not put himself in crowds, wear his mask, but yet still, after he retired, after he had really started living his life, when we were getting to what we thought was the end of the pandemic, the vaccines were being given, and everybody thought that was just going to be the be all end all of COVID. And bam, we were hit with it at the end of April of 2021.
Yeah. Did you get COVID as well?
I did. I did. I had it. My daughter had it, and Mike had it. So we all had it I had it exactly the same time as Mike, and we were quarantined together for about a week before he got so sick.
Yeah. And what were you doing in healthcare in the field?
I'm an RN and I do dialysis.
Okay. So you probably saw people often who were already worried about COVID and having to come in with pre-existing conditions and then have dialysis done.
Definitely, because all of our patients are already they're on dialysis for other medical complications that have ruined their kidneys, so they're already compromised. And, so yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the things that when I hear stories I think about is the people who have passed away were already at risk, but then had to continue to be at risk, going to see doctors and going to the hospitals and going in for services like dialysis and other things that actually increased their risk anyway. It's,
Right. And, you put these, especially the dialysis patients who road transportation on the vans, you're putting several patients together in this small space, and they have no choice because they have to come to dialysis or they will die. So it's kind of a catch 22. It's like,
yeah,
you know, you just do the best you can.
yeah. Yeah, so you and Mike got sick and stayed home, and then what happened?
The 25th of April just always sticks in my mind. He was feeling a little bit run down on the 24th, but the 25th was a Sunday, and we had somewhere we wanted to go that night to a Christian concert in our town. But his cough, he wasn't feeling terrible, but he just had this really bad cough. And I said, Mike, you can't go like that, not thinking that he had COVID. I said, everybody's going to look at you and think you have COVID, so we didn't. We stayed home. And Monday, I had to go to work, so I left him at home and just checked in with him all throughout the day. And he ran a temp off and on all day. It would go down, but never completely go away. And when I got home from work that afternoon, he was still in the bed. And if you know Mike, then that's just not him. I mean, he had non Hodgkin's lymphoma. He went through off and on over the past 12 years, different chemotherapy treatments, and very rarely did he let it get him down. He worked the whole time. So I knew this day when I got home that afternoon that something was wrong.
Mhm.
And so Tuesday, April 27th, we went to his PCP. And once they found out he had had the vaccine, they did not test him for COVID, even though he was running a fever of 103.6 and he had pneumonia on his chest x-ray. But at this point, this is when the vaccines they were really pushing them,
Mhm.
and the breakthrough infections had not started. to the
Yeah.
point that we're seeing them now. So they just never tested him and gave him IV antibiotics and sent us home. And on the 29th, which I think was a Thursday, I had to take him to the ER. And I was waiting in the waiting room. They said as soon as his COVID test comes back, we'll call you and you can come back with him. Well, I never heard and never heard. And so I called from the waiting room, and this is Kim Lancaster. You have my husband back there. I'm just waiting on COVID results so I can go back there with him. And they put me on hold, and they came back and they said, Miss Lancaster, I'm sorry, but he is positive for COVID.
Mm.
And it was just a shock. I mean, it truly was a shock. I mean, yes, I'm a nurse, been a nurse for a long time, but, we're being told that he did everything right, so he can't have COVID. Well, he did. So they kept him only overnight. He went home on the 30th. And of course, we were monitoring his oxygen levels and his temperature, which every night would spike in the 103s. It even got up to 104 one time.
Wow.
The longer we were home, like the more I could see him deteriorating, but he did not want to go back to the hospital because he truly felt like he was going to die from COVID if he ever went to the hospital. But it got to a point where his oxygen levels were dropping in the 70s with him just getting up and walking to the bathroom and coming back. And he asked me to take him back to the hospital on May the 4th. And he was admitted that day, and they put him in the like an ICU step down.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of the day, they had moved him to ICU, and he was on high flow oxygen. And by May 7th, he was on the ventilator. And I I had been trying to call his room and get in touch with him, but couldn't get in touch with him, to finally find out that he had to be put on the ventilator. So I didn't receive a call. So it was kind of like and I understand it was something that had to be done. I'm not knocking that, but it just took the wind out of me. Like I just couldn't, you hear it, but you don't think it's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
So during this time, I had been trying to see him because our anniversary was May the 9th. And I wanted to start putting in my request to get to see him, before we got to that actual day. And they did let me see him. I got to see him the day that he was put on the ventilator. I got to spend 2 hours with him. And then 2 hours after that, just about every day that he was at Fairview. But they put him on dialysis the day after he went on the vent. He was having some major blood pressure issues. It just wouldn't stay up. Like they couldn't move him or his pressure would drop. And he wasn't tolerating the dialysis. And he needed a special kind of dialysis that our hospital did not offer. So there was talk of transfer, but they didn't really feel like he was quite stable enough at this point to do that. But so May the 12th, which was like 5 days after he went on the vent, they started talking about weaning him off. And I was like, yes, we're heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
May the 14th, he comes off the vent. He's doing good. Vital signs are stable. I got to spend 3 hours with him. But he was really confused, which they told me was to be expected between ICU delirium because he had been in the hospital at this point for several weeks. And then, he had been paralyzed and sedated for a week.
Mm-hmm.
So just give it time is what they told me. But during this time, he started talking about all the people he saw, all his family members who had passed away, that he had gone to heaven while he was on the vent. And he said it was beautiful, and he wanted to know why they woke him up. And yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. He saw my grandparents, he saw his parents, friends of his who had passed away over the years. And the thing is, it was not really going away. Even when he was awake, he was like, do you see her? Do you see her? Like he was still seeing these people.
Oh.
And yeah. and he would just look up in the corner of the room and just shake his head. And I work with hospice, and when I work with hospice, I saw this a lot in dying patients. Like they would continue to see, they would start seeing their loved ones. They would start looking to the corner of the room and, seeing things that weren't there. And my mind, though, was not going there.
Mhm.
I could not allow myself to think that.
Yeah.
But the more his mentation got better, the more he started saying things to me to make me realize that he knew he was not going to survive this. Um, he was telling me where certain things were, telling me what to do with his vehicle, telling me he was sorry he was not going to be here for the birth of our daughter's baby. Um, but I guess, was protecting myself and thinking, oh, he's just confused. I just could not let my mind go there for some reason.
Yeah.
And he asked me, he said, did I die? And I said, no, baby, you're off the ventilator. You're still in Dublin where we live. I said, and you're doing good. Because at this point, he was down to the lowest amount of oxygen. He was eating. They were sitting him up in the bed a little bit. I mean, he was doing really good.
Yeah.
But I don't know, about May the 17th, just all of a sudden his oxygen requirements went up again. And on the 18th, his hemoglobin dropped out and he had to have a transfusion. And by the 19th, he was back up on the really high flow oxygen. Um, on the 20th, he almost coded. They were trying to swap out some of his blood pressure drips because he was on so many to keep his blood pressure stable. And one of them he did not agree with. And he literally, I was in the room with him and he almost died. They called in the code team, they brought in the crash cart, they slapped the pads on him. But they were able to get that medicine stopped
Mhm.
quick enough that they did not have to code him. But he was right there. And you're talking about panic. I was like,
Yeah.
I
Mm.
was just about to panic. But it's like something just happened, and it was just bam, bam, just downhill from there. On the 21st, he was back on the vent. On the 23rd, he was having breathing problems despite being on the vent. His oxygen was still low, and his hemoglobin kept dropping, and they couldn't figure out why. And I finally requested that he be transferred to a bigger facility. So he was transferred out by air evac to a town called Savannah, which is about 2 hours from us, and it's a major university hospital.
Mhm.
And I was by myself that night when he was transferred out. And as soon as that helicopter hit the air, my mind just started rolling backwards because one of the things he said to me before he went on the vent the second time, when he asked me if he died, he said, did I die? Did my children have to go to my funeral? Did I have to be flown to Savannah in a helicopter?
Oh.
And I said, no. Of course, at the time I was like, no, baby, you're here. You're
Mhm.
okay. But it's like the minute that helicopter hit the air, it just hit me like a ton of bricks, what I was watching, because I knew he wasn't coming home, and he knew he wasn't coming home. So, anyway, I had to sign something that night before they would even accept him, saying that I knew that he was very sick and that he may not make even the transfer. So once I signed that, of course, they sent him out. And there was some talk of whether or not I would be able to come, but they, thank the Lord, let me come. And I got to be with him every day. But, nothing went right once we got moved there. I just think the ball had been started rolling
Yeah.
the second time he went on the vent, and it was just on a downhill, just picking up speed. There just was no turning back. He just was very unstable. They talk about proning, where they turn them over on their stomach, and it's supposed to let parts of their lungs breathe that can't when they're laying on their back, get air to their lungs. But he could not even do that. He had to lay flat. Like, they could not even elevate the head of his bed 10 degrees, or he just would become extremely unstable. Wow. Like I said, this is a teaching hospital, and they told me that, the doctor told me, he said, he is the sickest patient that I have in this entire hospital. He said, out of all the trauma patients, out of all the ICU patients, he is my sickest patient. And I was like, wow. And but they sent in the palliative care team to talk to me my first day there, which was the 26th, that I could visit him, which caught me off guard because nobody told me that they were sending them in. Yeah. And so, when you hear palliative care, you're thinking dead, like he's fixing to die, like you don't want to do anything for him. And, I'm like, that's not why I sent him here. Now, if you do everything that you can do and you tell me that you've done everything, and now is the time, Miss Lancaster, okay. But I didn't send him here for you to give up on him.
Yeah.
The minute he rolls in the door, just because you're jaded from COVID and you're tired of COVID patients, is kind of the vibe this particular physician was giving off. So we had to have a come to Jesus meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike was 18 years older than me, so he was 66 when he died. And I think they were coming in and seeing what they considered an old man, laying in a bed with no quality of life. But I had to tell him, I was like, look, what you see is not what he was a month ago. He was retired. He was hunting. We were spending time with our grandkids. He was living his life. So don't base what you see. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't give up on him because of what you see laying before you. He was a person. He was a grandfather, a father, a husband, a brother, all these things. So don't walk in because you're jaded and not even try to do anything for him. Yeah. So the doctors do a week on and a week off up there. So we luckily only had a few days of this particular physician. And the next physician we got was great. She had just lost her father. And, I just asked her, I said, all I ask is that you treat him like you would treat your father or your husband or your family member. That's all I ask. And she did. She really, really went out of her way. Like, she did. I really feel like she did everything that she could do for him. I really do. But he started to get jaundice. He was really, really orange. His liver enzymes were steadily climbing. And his hemoglobin was dropping again. His platelets were really low. His oxygen level, by the second week in June, no, I'm sorry, first week in June, he just, despite the max vent settings, and he was on every blood pressure medicine they had, he just wasn't doing any better. And they were afraid he was going to code. And so we did meet with the palliative care doctor that night, me and his two sons. And we decided to take him off of life support. But we were kind of trying to figure out when, which is the strangest thing to me. You're sitting here trying to figure out when your husband is going to die. And so we were 2 hours from home. Savannah is 2 hours from our home. And my two children had not seen Mike. So they, in their heads, they kind of could still see him getting better. Mm-hmm. Even though I was coming home and really being very honest with him, sometimes they would tell me that I was being, that I wasn't having enough faith or hope or whatever. And so we made the decision that, yes, we were going to take him off life support, but felt like my children needed to see him to understand what was going on. to be able to accept what was going on. So we were toying back and forth. I think this was a Wednesday night about going home, talking to my children, and then coming back maybe Saturday. So spent the night in Savannah Wednesday night, and I get a call from the doctor early into the morning, Thursday morning, and he said, I don't know exactly what y'all have decided about a time frame. He said, but I've got him on max everything to keep him alive for you tonight. If you can come in the morning and take him off, because if you don't, he's going to code and he's not going to have the type of death that you want him to have. So I kind of feel like Mike took that burden off of me of having to decide when. And so I called my children and I was like, look, y'all got to come, you know. And so they came, my two kids, Mike's two kids, and my daughter, when she walked in the room, she just hit her knees, like literally. She just hit her knees and started crying. But she needed to see him to understand that this had to be done. And you know, he was my children's stepfather, but to them he was their father. Their father lives in the same city, but just did not have that close relationship. Mike just stepped into that role for them. So this was their father. But that was about 9 o'clock in the morning, and about 12, we took him off of life support. He lived not even 5 minutes after we took him off of life support, and they let us, they let us stay as long as we wanted to stay. And I called the coroner in Dublin because he's a friend of mine just from working at the hospital for so many years. And he said, I'm on the way. And it was just so surreal from there. It just seemed like, and then your mind you start replaying everything that happened and like, well, should I have done this? Could I have done this different? I should have insisted on this, and that's where your mind starts going.
Yeah.
And it's just been surreal ever since. It still doesn't seem real that the last time I heard his voice was on May 20th when they called me before he went back on the vent, and they handed him the phone and he said, I love you and it's going to be okay. And those were the last words I ever heard from him. And it just replays in your mind over and over, just everything.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's hard because people, I think we had talked about this earlier, people want to know, well, was he vaccinated?
Yes.
Well, of course, then he had to have underlying health issues.
Yes. Yeah.
And yes, and we talked about that too.
Yep.
It doesn't matter because it's still my husband who died. People want to put COVID in this pocket of just numbers, like this many unvaccinated, this many vaccinated, just a number. And my husband is not a number. He is a husband, father, brother, and it's so frustrating to me when people say things like that. And I know they don't mean anything, but what we hear, and I know what you hear, is, well, they were sick anyway. Well, they were, and it's just, it's so frustrating.
Yeah. Because they should be here. If COVID hadn't happened, it's a high likelihood that your husband would still be here, and so would my mom, and so would almost all of the over 800,000 people who have died so far, just in the United States.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter that he had some things that happened to him. He had cancer, but he had been in remission for several years, and he was living what he considered to be a very good, happy life.
Yeah.
And so, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's one of those things where I feel like it's so sad that people reach a point in their life, and I'm over 50, and you're like, I've got to take better care of myself. I've got to fix this. I've got to do this. I've got to walk more. I've got to, so that the rest of my life can be one that I want it to be. And people who make those changes and live so many years feeling so much better, and then COVID just comes in.
Right.
Oh, it's heartbreaking.
It is. And people don't know what to say,
Mhm.
period, I feel like, in grief.
Yeah.
And they really don't know what to say when it's your spouse, especially your married friends, because it's almost like it's going to rub off on them.
Yeah.
Like if I talk to her, then the reality that this could happen to me,
Mhm.
I may have to actually think about that. So people just don't, like, they don't call, they don't text, they don't visit, they don't. I mean, I can name on one hand the number of people who, from beginning to now, which has been 7 months, are still, you know,
Mhm.
faithfully checking on me.
Yeah.
And it's sad.
Yeah. Do you think some of your married friends don't wanna talk about their husbands thinking that that will make you sad?
I think that may be some of it, which is also very frustrating because most widows that I've talked to, and I don't know how you feel about your mom, but I'm sure you probably love to talk about her
I
when you
do.
can.
Yes.
Yes, talk about your memories, and even if you want to talk about what happened to her when she died, sometimes you just need to get that out.
Yeah.
But yeah, they don't want to talk about it because either they're scared it'll make me uncomfortable or make themselves uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And there's very few people that aren't widows that I feel like I can truly talk to about it, because after a period of time you feel like people give you a certain amount of time to grieve.
Mhm.
I don't know if you feel like this, but I just feel like people are like, okay, well, it's been 7 months. I mean, come on now, Kim.
Yep. Yep, exactly. It's
You
it's
should be okay.
yep. It's been a year. It's time to move on. Yes,
Right.
definitely.
And how do you move on from your mother of 50 years?
Yeah.
From your husband of 12 years? We were together for 17. I mean, this is your person.
Yep.
This is your person. This is not like, it just blows my mind sometimes to think that how people think that I should be acting.
Yeah. Well, and he was probably because it sounds like the 2 of you were married before and had kids with other people, so your relationship had to be like this thing where you felt, "This is my person. This is my soulmate.
Yes.
This is the person I had been looking for."
Yes, I finally found it, and you can appreciate it more when you were married and did not have it.
Yeah.
And so it's just, it's hard because from the time your feet hit the floor to the time you go back to bed at night, I mean, literally every single aspect of your day has
Yeah.
changed. From the way you get ready in the morning, from, you know, the phone calls on the way to work that aren't there anymore. There's nobody to know or care really if you get home from work on time or safely. Nobody cares what you want for supper. Nobody, and they seem like such small things,
Yeah.
but you realize just how much they mean when you don't have it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, the small things, but they're also everything, everything.
Right, right.
Yeah. Were you able to have a funeral for Mike?
We did, we did, and I think I mean, there were a lot of people there, but I do think that COVID did keep some people
Mhm.
away. But yes, we were able to have a funeral. Luckily, if there's any good to be had out of this, it was the time frame that he got sick. It was before this last one really kicked in
Yeah.
and towards the end of the first one. So we were kind of in this grace period,
Yep.
if you will. where I could visit, I could be with him.
Yeah.
These spouses that I've talked to who dropped their husband off at the emergency room and did not see them again until somebody called them and was like, your husband died.
Oh,
Like, I just cannot imagine that pain. And you can't have a funeral for him, and you can't, I just can't imagine. So there is blessings, I guess, to be seen in everything.
yeah. Yeah, and you talk about talking to widows. Are you part of widow groups online and have found some comfort there?
Yeah, there's a lot of Facebook groups that I'm a part of, but also, sadly enough, our small town had like around the time that Mike died. He died in June. Then I have another friend who lost her husband to COVID in July, another friend who lost her husband to COVID in August, and another friend who lost her husband to COVID in September.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
So there's a group of us here, in Dublin.
yeah. Has that helped? Do you
Yes. It helps tremendously to have somebody because, like, some friends I couldn't call and say, I love Mike, but I really could kill him for leaving me. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yes.
they're going to be like, Kim, he's already.
Yes.
But people just get it when they've been through
Mhm.
it. They know what you're feeling, and you can say things to them that maybe you couldn't say to other people.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you and your friends there say to each other that you help each other?
Just not trying to sugarcoat it and say, oh, it's gonna be okay. It's more like, look, girl, I know you feel like shit right now. Excuse my
It's all
French.
right.
I know you feel like shit, but I can promise you that this devastating raw grief that you're feeling right now will get better. I mean, and I just say that from 7 months out, looking back to my first few months. And that's what it is. It's just raw grief. Like, you're mad, you're this, you're that, you feel like you can't function. But as much as I still miss him now and grieve and probably cry every day, I can honestly say that the rawness of it, and I don't know if you feel that way with your mother. At the beginning, there's just this rawness. This can't be real. You're just mad. You're frustrated. And it does get better.
Yeah.
But you also have to acknowledge, I know what you feel, and not try to diminish that feeling.
Yeah.
And so, just those type things.
Yeah.
Yes, I get it. I totally get it. But I can tell you that it will get, I hate to say better, but better just in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt like for the first, oh man, maybe 7 or 8 months, I was in a fog.
Hmm.
And as I walked around and I saw people smiling or laughing or anything, I just thought, how can they be happy? I just it
Right.
didn't nothing looked right in the world. And it does
Right.
the fog lifts, it's different, but it does lift.
Yeah. And I totally get what you just said because you're walking around and you just want to say, don't you know my husband died?
Yeah.
Like, don't you know how shitty my life is right now? How can you walk around like that?
Mhm.
Or don't you know my mom just died? How can your life not be changed the way mine is?
Yeah.
But that's another thing that I do have to remember is that his death is not going to affect other people the way that it affected me. And although that sounds so simple and so like, duh,
Mhm.
you still have to tell yourself that so that you can give people grace sometimes for maybe not being
Yeah.
what you think they should be.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about you, but before my mom died, I hadn't really experienced death that close to me. My grandparents had passed away, but I wasn't there and I didn't see them a lot. And since she passed, I feel like I'm less afraid of saying the wrong thing and of the emotion of it. And I feel like I'm better able to be there for people in their loss, regardless of why their person died. Do you feel like that?
I do. I do. Because, before it actually happens to you, and I hate to say this, but we're just kind of, oh, that's terrible,
Mhm.
and I got to go to work tomorrow. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't stop you. But once you've been there, you can really relate to people, and you realize that sometimes just saying nothing, just being there is okay. And sometimes even saying what may not be the most wonderful thing to say is better than nothing. Because to me, when you can sit with me and you know me and you can't acknowledge the fact that I lost my husband, then I don't really know that I need to be around you.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I wanted to ask a question about Mike talking about heaven. And my mom died all alone in the middle of the night. And I know that because the nurse had checked on her and given her more morphine and then came back a half an hour later and she passed away. My mom's parents had long passed on and so had one of her brothers. And I am not a praying person, but I feel like I'm a spiritual person. And I I knew she was not in a good place, and I just sent out this prayer to my grandparents and my uncle to just be with her because I knew I couldn't be.
Mhm.
And I take comfort, even if I just take comfort in that. I really hope they were there. I just think they had to be there with her. Do you take comfort in Mike's experience of going to heaven?
I do. And we have kind of a different experience. We started going to church in 2015, and we really started going to church. Like we were baptized. We really started trying to have a relationship with God, not just oh, I'm saved.
Mhm.
And we did. And Mike just had this connection that I was always a little jealous of, because he just all through his life and our marriage, little things that happened, like he had a visitation dream where he was shown hell, and he woke up visibly upset, crying, shaking. He described the smells, the sounds, the just everything that you have ever read about somebody who had that sort of visitation.
Mhm.
He described perfectly. And I think that kind of set the wheels in motion, even though it was several years later, for us to start going to church, because he always had that in the back of his mind. And then when he had chemo the second time, our grandbaby also had cancer the same time Mike did the second time.
Oh.
He had stage 4 kidney cancer. He had to have one of his kidneys removed. And so they were going through chemo at the same time. And Mike said, Lord, please let me take his sickness. I will take his sickness, add it to mine. Just don't let this chemo just totally debilitate this 2-year-old child.
Mhm.
And that was the sickest that Mike had ever been in the years that I was with him, and he went through these cancer treatments,
Mhm.
and to the point to where he was about to give up. Like, our preacher had come over, everybody was really really worried about him, and he had a visitation again from the Lord, where the Lord told him, "You've got to live," and he showed him another grandbaby, another grandson.
Oh.
Little did we know that less than a year later, our daughter-in-law would get pregnant, and at the gender reveal, of course, it was a grandson.
Oh.
So he's just always had this special connection with God. And so I know that there is a heaven, and that my husband is there.
Yeah.
And when he told me that he saw my grandparents, and my grandparents told him that they not to be afraid that they would take care of him. I absolutely believe that your mother's family was there with her because nobody wants to die alone.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely believe that her family was there with her. I have no doubt. I have to believe, based on my personal experience as a nurse, as a hospice nurse, um, with my husband, I just believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, and being a hospice nurse, I I've heard that from other people too, that people at the end, they see they're closer to the other side. They see their loved
Yes.
ones and they are open. It sounds like Mike was open while he was like fully alive. He had special connections and special
Mm,
experiences.
he did. So I completely believe that your mother did not die alone
Yeah, I have
and
to.
was not afraid and was not, I just, and I'm not just saying that to make you feel better. I just know it. I know it.
Yeah, thank you for that. That helps. I keep a picture of her when she was 18 with her parents at a luau in Hawaii because my grandpa was stationed there. And I keep that by my bedside. And I imagine that when they were there, that was her happy moment. Those were her parents, and that's what they look like when they came to get her.
Hmm. And that's what I've always heard, like from my patients and even from family members I have some family members who have very close spiritual, like almost mediumship type
Mm. Mm-hmm.
things. And anytime my grandmother has been seen, she's always been seen younger and in the prime of her life.
Yeah.
And when Mike had a visitation, my daughter had a visitation dream, same thing with Mike. And my stepson had a visitation dream, same thing. I mean, he said it was no doubt that it was my dad, but it was just my dad just in the prime, when he was in the prime of his life, like his face was chiseled and he was just, so you don't get a new body, but you get a refreshed, you know, it's just amazing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's how I see myself. When I think about myself, I don't think about myself as I am right now. I think about myself in my, I don't know, early 20s, maybe 25.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to ask you, we're recording this in January, so you're halfway through the first year. Do you have any idea what you're going to do for healing and support as you come up on that part of April into June?
I I'll be honest with you, I have not been able to go back to church. And at first it was just because I was mad. I was mad. Like I had all the faith because I kept notebooks of every single day that he was in the hospital, medical things, that went on with him. I talked to his nurses twice a day when I couldn't be there. And even when I went home, I would still call. So I kept all these notebooks. I've got two notebooks, one from Dublin, one from Savannah. But I also wrote like what I was thinking, what I was feeling. And I had so much faith in God that He was going to heal him on this side of earth. And it's like, because they say if two people join together and ask and pray in God's name, that He will answer.
Mhm.
And He had all these people praying for him. And I was like, I was just so mad. But sometimes our prayers are not answered in the way that we want them to be answered. Like his healing, yes, he was healed, but he was healed on the other side, not on this side. Because I don't think that his body could have, I just think he would have been on dialysis. I think he would have been, his quality of life, if he had lived, and I can see this now, would have been terrible. and he wouldn't have wanted that. But I think that I'm really feeling the urge again to go to church. I don't know that I'll be able to go back to the church that we went to just because there are so many memories tied up there. And
Yeah.
but I really feel like I need to go back to church. And I really feel like there's something called grief share. I know you've probably heard of it. I don't. It's grief share, and it's a group, but it's not just for widows. It's for anybody who suffered loss. And so I'm thinking about doing that. It's like a 6-week program, and you get a book, and you go to a meeting once a week. And so I've been thinking about that, and I've actually been thinking about starting my own group of just widows, because widows my age are hard to find,
Yeah.
which is a good thing, but then it's also it's hard
Yeah.
because I mean, I'm not lessening the grief of an older widow, but you just sometimes need people your
Mhm.
age. So all these ladies that I know who have lost their husbands, I would like to form some sort of a support group eventually when I get, you know, when I get right enough to do it.
Yeah.
So, and I think that will help. And just doing things like this, like talking to you and just telling my story helps a lot.
Yeah.
It helps to talk about it, to put it out there instead of just going through it in your mind just over and over and over.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, I don't know. I think the new year was harder for me than any of the holidays. Like, both of our birthdays were in October. And then, of course, we had Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Yes.
But something about going into that new year, knowing that it is a year
Mhm.
that he will never have been in, it just really messed with me
Yeah.
for a while. But I know he'd want me to live. He always told me, I want you to live. I want you to find somebody. I want you to be happy. And I was like, well, you're better than me because if I die first, I dare you to I dare you to find somebody. But that's not even on my radar. But just keeping it in the back of my mind too, that I know that he wants me to live.
Mhm.
He always told me that because, the age difference, we kind of knew that barring some tragic accident that he would probably go before I did. And so he talked about it a lot. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to hear it,
Yeah.
you know. But he would always tell me, I hope you know how much I love you. I want you to be happy. I want you to live if something happens to me. I want you to find somebody who loves you. And I just try to keep that in the back of my mind.
Yeah. One of the questions that I ask everybody near the end is, and you still work in healthcare, not all the time, but you still do go in and work in healthcare, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you say to people who tell you COVID isn't real?
I'm very quick to tell them I have 7 months of pure hell to prove to you that COVID is real. Like, I'm not going to argue with anybody, but I'm also not going to hear that and just be satisfied with that. I mean, I'll say what I have to say, and that's it, but I'm not going to just let that go by
Yeah.
because I can't, because it is real. And it's so frustrating. But luckily at my job, we see our patients 3 to 4 days a week for 3.5 to 4 hours a day, or we did, when I worked all the time. And so you build a relationship with them. So they all knew what I had gone through, and they were actually more sympathetic than some of the people that have been in my life for years.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just don't see how you can watch TV, how you can see all of this and still not believe that COVID is real.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, it's beyond me. And so for people like that, what do you say?
Yeah.
You want to say, okay, idiot, and turn around and walk off.
Exactly.
But, right, but you can't. And so you just tactfully tell them that I'm sorry, but I unfortunately know very well how real COVID is.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you definitely don't want them to find out by experiencing the worst of COVID and losing somebody.
Right, right.
Yeah. Did you see the memorial in Washington, D.C.? Have you sent in Mike's name to any of the memorials?
I did the one where they put all the flags out,
Yeah.
where you send in your personalized flag and they would put it out for you. I did that.
Mhm.
I've contacted Ramey's Memorial in New Jersey,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of help out, financial help out there for widows of COVID
Yeah.
that they don't necessarily push for you, but I've found out about. Luckily, I don't know if it was just divine intervention sending things my way. Like, I had an email sent to the funeral home. Hey, I heard Mike Lancaster that you had his body. Could you please get in touch with his wife? There is a grant that we would like to see if she qualifies for. So I got money through that because Mike was a health care worker
Yeah.
who died of COVID. There's that. There is a grant through FEMA where you can get repaid for up to $9,000 for funeral expenses.
Wow.
And I got that. There's several things out there that aren't pushed too much that some widows don't know about. On our networking groups on Facebook, of course.
Mhm.
But like the newer widows that come into that, they don't know.
Yeah. I wonder if they think that it's not available anymore. Because there is this sense that I feel anyway that people just want to move on and that
Yeah.
it's all going to just go away. COVID's going to go away.
I know that the FEMA grant is still going on now because of the uptick in COVID
Mhm.
again. It's taken a little while for FEMA to process the applications, but I know that that's still going on. Now, the grant that I got with Mike, this is another reason this was a blessing. It was to run out December the 31st. They contacted me at the beginning of December,
Mhm.
and luckily they fast tracked it so that I could get it. But now that was something that I had never heard of, and had the funeral home not forwarded that to me, I would have never known about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are expenses and things that at your age and his age, because I don't feel like 66 is old at all, that you just don't think about.
No, and you don't think, if you have not actually had to plan a funeral for anybody, you don't realize how expensive it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's $13,000 for just his funeral.
Yeah.
And, that's a lot of money for most people.
Yeah. Yeah, my mom went to church with someone who owned a funeral home, and she had Alzheimer's, so she was a little odd. She said odd things sometimes, but when she would see him at church, she would always walk up to him, and he had no idea who she was at the time. She would say, "I'm not ready for you yet." That's what she would
Oh,
say.
wow.
And then eventually, my sister and I knew that my mom wanted him to take care of her, and so we prepaid for everything for her. But we had already had all those conversations and tried to talk about it as much as we could with her because she had Alzheimer's, so we knew that at some point she was gonna die, we just didn't know when.
And that's a good point that you just made. If I could give any advice, know what your spouse wants
Mm,
and make plans so that you're not down there feeling like you're just going through the motions.
yeah,
And that's what it felt like. I mean, I'm satisfied with everything I did, but I had a lot of help around me with my family. But he had $5,000 designated as burial insurance, which he had done years ago,
Mhm.
obviously, not knowing how much it would be actually when he finally did die. But, $13,000. So I had to pay $8,000 out of pocket, but luckily I was reimbursed for that by FEMA.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're in that grief fog too, right there at the beginning that goes on for a long time, making those decisions that you never thought you would have to make or even asked your
Right.
partner about. Yeah.
Right. And you're trying to pay bills, and maybe you're a spouse who has never had to pay bills
Yeah.
because he paid all of our bills. So when he ended up suddenly in the hospital on the vent, it hit me one day. I was like, we got bills to pay. Like, I don't even know where they are.
Oh, yeah.
So, that's another piece of advice. He always tried to show me, but I did not want to hear it
Mhm.
because that meant that I would have to think about him not being here.
Yeah.
But I don't know. As hard as it is, I feel like a big girl because I had to move out of the house that we were renting because they were going up on the rent, and I bought me a house. I never thought I could do that by myself. There's just so many things that I didn't think that I could do, never thought I would have to do,
Yeah.
that I've done. And it's like, yes, I can. I'm gonna be okay. It's gonna suck getting to okay,
Mhm.
but I'm gonna be okay one day.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kim. Uh,
Oh, you're welcome. I enjoyed it.
yeah. Yeah, me too. I every time I hear a story and it, they hurt, they're heartbreaking, I cry every time. You can hear me sniffling and wiping my nose, but it's healing. There's just a little bit of healing that happens.
Yes, there is, and it helps to hear. That's why when I found your podcast and was looking, not to diminish parents or brothers, but you're looking for what you went through,
Mhm. Yeah.
And I was like, if widows could come and find other widows or widowers, this would be perfect. So I was like, I've got to contact her.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you did. I have the episode that's out right now, the next one is a woman named Mary and her daughter, because Mary was very nervous to do the podcast on her own. She was married to her husband for 57 years,
Wow.
and she talks so much about, time and healing and how she's getting through life at her age and after so many years together without him. That one,
Oh,
yeah, it's a
oh.
beautiful one. And your story, you and Mike, I just so appreciate you sharing it.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
And that's the show, everyone. If you've lost a loved one to COVID and would like to share your story on the show, please send me an email. My email address is forthosewelostpodcast@gmail.com. This show won't ever have a members area or episodes that you have to pay to listen to, but there are expenses to hosting a podcast, and if you'd like to help, you can support this show at buymeacoffee.com/forthosewelost. The link is in the notes below. If you like this episode, please share the show. Share it with your friends, share it on your social media, and once you've done that, rate and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. And then go rate it on Apple Podcast, because that's where most of our new listeners come from. Ratings and reviews are the main way this show finds new listeners. So please share the show. Until next time.